Oh, I'm 30 seconds late. Oh no. Hopefully that's not going to bother anybody. But I'm here for our unscripted conversation about mental health. That's right. This is R&R, Mental Health Unscripted, where we tune in every 7 o'clock on Sunday to just have a conversation about mental health. And if you are watching this afterwards, hello. We try to do it every week. So I pretty much try to stick to every Sunday at 7 o'clock. That's Eastern time, by the way. So for those of you who are abroad, but or at least in different time zones, we would love to hear your chat, to want to give your opinions, tell us how stupid we are. That's fine too. I have been getting more of that hate on the YouTube lately. That's okay. It's part of the process. That's what I keep telling myself. People love you. Don't listen. It's okay. Don't let the haters win. But what we're doing today is really just having an unscripted conversation and people can ask questions. So with that said, I try not to call out anybody who might be in the chat, which right now is going so live and crazy right now that I can't even answer all the questions. Those who are actually watching live, don't tell the audience that's not actually true, that's listening later. But anyway, I try not to call out the people who are there, but I can't guarantee anonymity. So in terms of confidentiality, I am responding and reading the thing that you say. So I'll try not to be like, this is Jessica Hootersmeckel. I can't come up with a fake name, apparently. I'll just say, this is John Travolta asking so-and-so. I don't call people's name out. But obviously some names, like the name that just came out was the person's name. And it's pretty obvious who the person is if it's that. With that said, as a therapist response, I'll let you know when it's my opinion, but I try to keep it pretty evidence-based. And my main modality, my main theory that I like to work in, my framework, the kind of the technique that I lean on mostly is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is the third wave of behavioral therapy. So there's, behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and then things like dialectical behavioral therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy. But we don't necessarily get all technical. And like pretty much every therapist I know, we use a lot of different techniques from a lot of different approaches. But hopefully your therapist is giving you evidence-based techniques, not just their opinion on stuff. But I will give my opinion if you ask for it. So in this chat. Okay. I'm hoping to hear about strategies to manage unwanted thought loops. Great topic. So it is really easy to get stuck in rumination. And the go-to acceptance commitment therapy metaphor for that is the quicksand. I actually saw a video of a guy getting out of quicksand, and it worked a little different than they describe in the books with acceptance commitment therapy. But it's still worth mentioning, and I kind of somewhat comical, but could have insight too. But basically, when you're in quicksand, the first thing that people want to do is they want to push away and resist the thoughts. And what ends up happening is when we try to resist thoughts, they usually come back and with a vengeance. So they come back even stronger and stronger and stronger. And one of the things of the reason why that tends to happen is because there is at least a part of our brain that very much wants to think about something. Okay. So whatever you're stuck in, there's a part of you that wants to think about that thing. And then another part of you that doesn't want to think about that thing. There's a lot we could get into with that whole different parts of us and how to engage and get perspective on the different aspects of our personality. But it's like if you tell a baby to shut up, it's not going to stop crying. It's just going to cry louder. If you tell that part of you to shut up, it's just going to cry louder. And so instead of resisting and trying to push away the thought, what they tell you to do in quicksand is basically wait disbursement. Same thing, like for those of you who are up north and enjoying the cool weather, or not enjoying the cool weather and trying to survive it, either way. Lakes that are frozen over and you don't know how thick the ice is. If you're trying to get across it the safest way you can it would be laying on the ice. And that might feel uncomfortable. That might feel cold. That might not, be something that you want to do. It might seem scarier in the moment, but it is the most chance of success. And so if we're trying to process thoughts, and I can get way more specific if you give me more to work on, but on the general topic of what to do with unwanted thought loops is you got to find a way to face them, get down in them, and then inch through them. So processing through those thoughts in a way that keeps momentum, and that momentum might be real slow. We just gotta make sure that some momentum is there, and then we've stopped the cycle. So in some ways, it's like I'm saying the fix for unwanted thoughts is learning to want those thoughts. The fix to try to stop thinking about something is to decide to think about it. This is a paradoxical intention kind of thing, which is a cool little thing to talk about. So there's a thing called paradoxical intentions. That was a technique started by Dr. Frankl, who is the Man's Search for Meaning author who survived the concentration camps. And he talks about logotherapy, which is purpose-driven therapy, but he's a psychologist, so he has a lot of different theories, and one of them is paradoxical intentions. And my favorite example of paradoxical intentions is somebody who can't stop shaking. So they're real nervous, and maybe their hands are shaking, maybe their knees are weak, maybe they can't seem to stand on their own 2 feet. Maybe they're just in love and all shook up. But the point is that instead of focusing on trying to stop shaking, which is sometimes difficult to do, and we feel like we're lost control of our body, a way to kind of gain control of our body, Dr. Frankl said, is paradoxical intentions. Instead of trying to not shake, it's actually purposely trying to shake as fast as you possibly can. Keep shaking, shake more and more and more until all of a sudden you feel like you can't shake anymore. You've shaken all that you can. You've gone as intense as you can. You shake as rapidly as you possibly can. And then just stop. And sure enough, many, many clients find that they can just all of a sudden stop. It's like the need for shaking was resolved. So in the general thing, again, depends on what we're talking about, but I would say, what part of me wants to process that thing? What would I need? What would that part of me need to be able to truly let that topic rest? And how can I inch my way through it, processing through those thoughts rather than just pushing them away? And there's a lot of ways that as we do it, speaking of acceptance and commitment therapy, thanks for the like, whoever gave me the like, thumbs up, that's cool. Yep, comments, likes, and of course, all those joining us in chat, feel free to drop questions anytime, by the way. Don't feel like you have to interrupt me. I'll get to the chat questions when I can for the topics, but fill up those chats with questions. So diffusion techniques are big in ACT. And this is basically where we separate ourselves from the thoughts and feelings to not detachment level, but just to realize that though we have thoughts and feelings, the feelings and thoughts are not us. And so when it comes to that processing through it, that's key. So as we're going through these thoughts that we don't want to think, it's how can I go through them? Hey, I got more likes, so I appreciate that. Thanks, guys. And gals. As we're processing through that, it's like, how can I do it in a way that's diffused? So, obviously we think of diffusion as like a bomb that's going to go off and we want it to not blow up. So we take away that fuse, right? But a fused thing is also like if, like a wedding, as Michael Scott was, 2 metals fused together, right? Or welded together. Welding, wedding. I think he might have spelled it wrong when he looked up the definition. Either way, the point is that that's what happens when we get so connected to a certain thought, like I am depressed. And so say if we have this feeling of I am depressed, maybe we've gone through seasons of depression that have really taken us out for a long time. And maybe that's the unwanted thought. And so we're like, I'm depressed. And it's like, no, I'm not depressed. I don't want to think about the fact that I'm depressed, which is going to incentivize you to like not deal with whatever is possibly making you sad. And if you think about the things that generally make us sad, now this is a big generalization here, but it's generally the things that we care about most. So what will happen if you move away from all of the things you care about most of all? Guess what? You'll get more and more depressed. And so this is one of those negative feedback loops that we get stuck into, because if you're afraid of depression, then what you're naturally going to walk away from is everything that you deeply care about, because the things that you deeply care about are going to create feelings of sadness. There's no way around that. You can't care about things and not have them sometimes make you sad, whether it's a person, whether it's a topic. The more we care about, the more we're invested, the more anxiety and the more sadness are going to happen as a natural result of that thing. So if I'm walking away from everything that truly matters to me in life, I become lethargic, I become withdrawn, I become numb, and that is actually the core of depression. So depression can actually be caused partly or heavily influenced by a fear of sadness. Does that make sense? I don't, maybe that just sounds kind of mind-blowing to me in the concept of thinking about it. But yeah, if you're afraid of sadness, you are probably going to make decisions that are going to make depression more likely. Thanks for the yes. I appreciate that affirmation. Okay, growth often feels worse before it feels better. You might feel sadder, angrier, or more confused for a bit. That usually a sign you're touching something real. Well said, perfectly said, especially that you're touching something real. So getting to the core of something. This is why it's really sad when you have somebody who was raised in a family where they were not free to cry. So my dad, not a perfect dad by any means. He did have a little bit of that John Wayne thing sometimes with like the tough it out. It's like, oh, you're going to cry. I'll give you some reason to cry about. But well, not actually that one though. So what I was going to say is he had some things about like toughing it up and you can do better. I better see arms and legs attached if I'm going to see you, complaining. But he did make it very normal, especially as a man, to be a safe place to cry. He was somebody who was a gym teacher. He got the state championship for chin-ups and dips when he was in his 40s, and he also was a national champion wrestler. So he's a very tough dude. You didn't want to mess with him, but he would cry at Hallmark commercials. He made it okay to process, okay to feel. And I am so grateful for that model as a young man, because I am deeply emotional and unapologetic for it. I remember actually having an argument with somebody because they were saying, I don't want to say the actual word, but they were basically accusing me of being emotionally a wimp. And they're saying, you're too sensitive. And I basically was like, my goal is to be more sensitive. And they couldn't understand that at that time. And I was sharing it because not that my goal was to be permanently sensitive, but in that season of my life, what growth looked like was me becoming more sensitive. I had been a people pleaser and put myself as a doormat. So that was kind of my narrative. And let me be clear about that. That's not to make you feel bad for me, because that was a narrative that was self-imposed. Since I didn't feel lovable, I found that in society, I could orient myself and get myself to be liked as a person that helped others. And I did have a heart to help people. So it's not like that's not genuine. I still do that because it's still a part of my core design. And this is like the nuance work that we want to get to in therapy, where you understand your tendencies, you understand your struggles, And you see, it's like that my greatest weakness is my greatest strength. It's like that's how life goes. Like the things that you're really good at can be liabilities. So my core design is a helper. I'm always going to be one. But that makes my likely problem story that I can fall into is that of a doormat, that the people only care about me because of the things I can do for them. And if I can't keep up that standard of doing, then they will reject me, and then I will be alone. Then no one will really care about me. And sure enough, by the way, some of you who know me know I went through that season and I wasn't wrong. There was a whole lot of people who felt betrayed by me, rejected me, said terrible things about me. And while they might have a different story about why exactly, I am human and I do make mistakes, the real core of it was I couldn't keep being the doormat. I couldn't keep just helping and giving and being empty and dry forever. Eventually I cracked. You need to either do stuff out of the overflow or you're going to crack. Okay, so all that to say, for me, growth in the next season looked like being super sensitive, figuring out my self-protection, self-defense, and sensitivity to stuff. So I wasn't going to just go, you know what, it doesn't matter how people treat me. It doesn't matter how I feel, right? Whatever I can do for them. Got another like, thanks. And also thanks for the comments. Let's go, Joe, and the heart. I appreciate that. So in that whole process of learning to be sensitive, which by the way is part of what makes me a good therapist. It's also why I'm not scared of the dark. You have merely adapted to the dark, but I was born in it, because I have been able to go through some of the, things that I've never gone through personally. I can sit through hearing a client talk about the worst traumas and truly be present in it because I have experienced the depth of despair, the depth of depression. I have experienced the darkness, and I'm very comfortable in it. I don't love it. It's not like I'm, choosing to live in the dark in my life, but I can navigate it fairly easily at this point in my life. So I don't freak out when I do experience sadness. I don't freak out when I do feel hurt. It's just part of the process of a deep, meaningful life, and I can help people with the others. So that's a really long answer of why growth often feels worse before it feels better. That's why sometimes the next step is for you to be more sensitive. Now, that doesn't mean that now I walk around taking offense to everything people say. I do learn to not personalize, and I am wanting to eventually be thick-skinned. I eventually do want to have it be where when people say negative things about me, it doesn't really bother me because that comes from a really positive self-regard, and that's not a bad thing necessarily too. But when you have a negative self-regard and the shield that feels so protective of I don't care what anyone says about me is actually not strength, it is weakness. And so you'll get stuck in that pattern that is actually drawing you away from the things that most matter in life if you're trying to put on that shield of I don't care what anybody thinks. Where do you think shame comes from? Experiences, messages, or relationships? What purpose did my shame originally serve? I had to take a second before I answer that one. Yeah, I think a lot of things for shame. So I do think there's a societal model that is trying to tell us how to live. And every society has one. Actually, we live in a society right now that it's probably one of the most dismantled than it's ever been. And while I think these models tend to be way too unflexible, and people that fall outside of normal distribution are bullied a lot of times for it, Hi, I'm here. Thanks. Glad you clicked in. I appreciate you. Um, I think that it actually is good to have a model. So to have a norm of like, this is how relationships generally work in this society isn't a bad thing. To have it be where it's like, and if you're not one of these people, you're bad and, don't deserve the same level of stuff. That's obviously not healthy. But it's like, so a big one obviously is relationships. So the nuclear family married with two kids and a dog, right, is going to be not necessarily super positive or make you feel like a success if you live alone with one cat. I don't know anybody who would do that kind of craziness. So shame can come from that. Shame can basically come from being so outside of the social norms, feeling like you're not on track with other people. Shame can come from religion. So there's a lot of, especially in Christian culture, a very shame driven approach. It's interesting, though I don't think it's biblical. There is a way of looking at the sinful nature aspect that will just give us this idea of not only shame, but permanence in shame. In other words, it's my very nature that I should be ashamed of. And so we shame people a lot, especially involving like sex stuff in Christian culture from that. Shame could come from obviously our parents and their expectations of us as well. So I think shame a lot of times comes from expectations we put on ourselves based on the influence of others, right? So it might not even be that, for instance, our father really thought, if you don't become a doctor, I'm going to be disappointed in you. They might have not actually thought that, but we might have thought that they thought that. We felt like they thought that. So when we became a music teacher instead, then all of a sudden, we feel like they were disappointed and we failed them, and so we feel ashamed when they might not feel that at all. And maybe they do. Maybe they're jerks and they, are like, I don't care about people who aren't doctors or something like that, right? But the point is that the common denominator is not that person or what really they think. It doesn't actually matter. It's irrelevant. It's what it influences in our mind. So, and I was actually talking to someone recently where it was kind of surprising that they didn't understand this concept because they're having a problem with their mom. And I was talking about how to resolve this, which is the projection of their mom inside their mind. And I had so many different ways of explaining it. The metaphor of the mother, it wouldn't matter if your mom is even alive or not. And they kept going back to, it's not healthy to talk to my mom. By the way, this isn't a client. Just, I don't use anecdotes from clients because it's confidential. If I do, I make sure it's like very like impossible for anybody to figure out, and I'll change certain details. But most of the time, I'm giving examples of other people in my life. So that is, we'll say, well, if you tell me something's confidential, I'll hold it with the same confidential. But my joke is, you can get me for free, but if you want confidentiality, you have to officially become a client. So you have to pay for confidentiality. That's funny. Anyway, they could not figure out. They kept going back to their actual mom and the problems with their actual mom rather than the metaphor of the mom that still existed and was heavily impacting their personality and daily life, because their fear of turning into their mom was leading to polarization and different things like that. How do I show more grace for other family members that currently live a dysfunctional lifestyle instead of avoiding them altogether and also avoiding being judgmental toward them as well? One of the things, it's really helpful. So your name here on YouTube is Wholesome Recovery, right? And this is a very common denominator, common trend for people that have gone through recovery, that have bettered their lives, that we think about after we've gotten better. well, we've done it, why can't they? And can actually be more likely of falling into judgment of people that are struggling with the same thing that we used to struggle with. When if we actually think back, we realize whatever our struggles were, we actually often, this is not always the case, but failed a lot along the way. It took us a long time to actually get to that place of wholesome recovery, pun intended. And so reminding ourselves of the long process we took on those things is helpful. Also remembering that like maybe there were some things that we could change right away, but we struggle with changing other things. And looking at our humanity helps us to have empathy for others. And what I like to do is to switch from a judgment mindset to a not only curiosity. So curiosity is the antidote to judgment, but influence only perspective. So I look at the influence that somebody is having on me. And if that influence is negative, I don't necessarily say, well, then I have to cut the person off, right? So I first go, is there a systematic way that I could change the influence? So I'll use the example of I had some guys that were coming and working out at my house in the mornings, and some of them were doing a little bit of trash talk that bothered me, and then I realized I never really set the tone for that not being okay, and it's my house, so I could say my house, my rules. We're going to be positive here. So I started doing that, and like everybody loved it, and they stopped trash talking, and they started lifting each other up, and it actually was all that was needed. So I could have gone, and I know this is a very different example, but I could have gone, oh, that terrible person who's being such a trash talker, right? I don't want them around. But instead, I first looked at an influence factor and how can I set them up for success, right? With the family that you're talking about, it's probably so culturally wired that that's very hard because they're so deep in the culture that is the norm. And so one thing, if they're willing, that might help is taking them out of their culture and into yours. So inviting them into the church structure, for instance, I know is one that you're familiar with, or recovery circles, and actually getting them to see and experience a different culture, and not just passively, right? Don't just take them there and say, hey, see what you think, but actually like explain, hey, this is what I love about this, and this is what I like about that, and this is why I like this more than that. What do you think? And there's no right or wrong. Like there's no like, oh, but they don't like it, so they're bad, right? Just encouraging them to have that curiosity and see if you can inspire them to want changes in their own life. What skills help when my inner critic takes over? So in worst case scenario, I would say that actually just bounce. So one attention technique is called the bounce technique. Instead of focusing on not thinking, we bounce to something that would also capture our spotlight, our attention. And so to be able to go, okay, the instinct is to fight the inner critic. And don't get me wrong, that can be a good approach, but you're a smart lady, so I'm guessing you've already tried in these examples that you're asking about, where you just tried to reason out the self-critic. That's probably the first line of defense, is to see if the self-critic is being rational and to think about how you can process things differently. To actually engage in the self-critic in a way that is friendly can be helpful. Got another like. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the likes. Engage with the self-critic in a way that it's like saying, hey, this is what you want. Let's see if we can find a win-win together. But if not, bounce that person. So what I mean by that is engage deeply your imagination. And I'm not saying anything that isn't true necessarily. I'll give you examples, but in something that matters. So what could this look like? This could look like, any kind of form of meditation. It could look like going on a walk. And while you're on that walk, having a conversation with your higher power. It could look like, let me say here, Well, I have this place of peace visualization exercise that I really love, and it's deeply ingrained in me. So I'm spending time often in that place of peace. If I'm stuck in any kind of thought and I need to get out, I take a break. And that might look like, so for mine's a forest, and I have a little creek and I pebbles there, and there's Jesus, there's a deer, and my cat Ellie, who passed away, who's actually, there's a picture of her on the mantle right there. So that's Ellie. So, and she purrs on my lap, and I pet her, and I have practiced that place of peace so much that I can recall it and have it be very real to me in a heightened emotional state. So even when I'm really struggling emotionally, because I've practiced it, and I didn't practice it for like hours, I just practice it very frequently. So consistency trumps spending a lot of time, or intensity, right? Spending a lot of time on something. Just practicing that place of peace is a great way for me to get away from that inner critic. Isn't the ego the author of my shame, using the conditions of our experience to justify it? So I would say the ego, okay, there's two different egos. So when we usually are talking about ego, we're talking about pride, essentially, right? But ultimately, the ego, Freudian originally, was just the conscious awareness of self, right? So according to that definition, the conscious awareness of self, ego is the filter of our shame. So it's like ego is the inner critic evaluating whether we should be ashamed or not. So that's kind of right. Now, when it comes to a sense of either, and even the way we use ego nowadays usually is hopefully not limited to just pride. Hopefully we can also talk about the opposite problem of, because it's still egocentric, of I'm the worst, I'm the best, to mutually egocentric things just from the opposite side of the coin, but the same coin, is this filled with this isolating sense of self, right? And shame absolutely might be a driver of that. So it could even be that shame could lead you to a enhanced ego. So here's the real thing. Here's the fascinating thing about the escape of the ego. How do you get rid of ego, right? And it's almost a trick problem, because focusing on you is not a way that you can get rid of ego. It's connecting with others, connecting with your higher power, connecting in things that truly matter and you value in life. Even connecting with nature can help you escape the ego. And so, so our ego encourages us to isolate, which then fills us more with shame, or can. It can also fill us more with pride. So I don't know if that's really an answer to your question, but using the conditions of our experience to justify it. I think what you're really saying is shame is at its center a problem of the ego, a fracture of the ego, and I think that's definitely true. Mindfulness is a way to disengage the ego. Absolutely. Yeah. So like, yeah. And I mean, not just mind. Well, no, I mean, I guess broadly mindful would work, because anytime you're engaged, because I was thinking of more classic mindfulness of like meditation, but I know, we've talked about mindful and soulful. So soulful is like a reflection of the past. It's where wisdom is. It's where commitment is. Mindful is about being present, and it is, either one can be good and bad, right? Being mindful or soulful. So like soulful, I can reflect, I can process on the things that happened. But if I get lost in soulfulness, I'm disengaging from the present in a way that could isolate me. This is a problem I had most of my life. I would intellectualize. Partly I had chronic pain, so it was very helpful for me to disengage from the present, because the present was physically painful, and then to just philosophize. So I still have the tendency to do that in ways that are sometimes unhealthy, but I've come a long way of being able to be mindful and being present. So I actually had though, if you know, you know, a roommate who was a very mindful guy, very good at enjoying the moment, not necessarily great at planning for the future, but really great at enjoying the moment. And so we kind of balanced each other out when we lived together. And I hope I taught him some soulful things, but I know he taught me a lot of mindful things and helped me be a lot more present in that moment. So much. But wasn't he out of his mind? Isn't that how you get rid of the ego? Is getting out of your mind? Maybe losing your mind is not always a good thing if you find something better along the way. How can you tell the difference between familiarity and safety? Great question. Okay, so actually, we did a group. I'm looking at my living room here. We did a group of recovery stuff, and there was this guy who was telling the story of how uncomfortable he felt in this moment with all of us here in my house talking about our feelings and love and sharing, and how he knew he was safe, but everything in him felt panic and fear. And he was talking about how only a few weeks ago, I think at the time, he was in a park doing drugs at night, and there was a shooting in that same park, and he felt perfectly safe. That's familiarity, right? So that's the difference between familiarity and safety. Our nervous system is programmed to familiarity, not safety. So like one teacher that I very much respect, I didn't hear her saying this, but I heard from someone that she talks about not trusting your gut and how your gut is wrong, which is not surprising to me that she says that, because she typically deals with addicts and they are very much wired for familiarity that is not healthy often, right? So there's always exceptions to every rule, but a lot of the addicts are very familiar with very unsafe things. So their nervous system still gives green lights, even though they should be going, warning, warning, danger, Will Robinson, danger, right? So how do you tell the difference between familiarity and safety? I mean, my go-to answer is pattern recognition, is looking at, is this displaying things that are objectively healthy? Because then even if my gut is telling me it's unsafe, I might be needing to rewire my signal. So looking at that, right? Healthy long-term relationships are a good thing. And I don't mean romantic necessarily. I mean friendships. I mean family. It's like they're all getting around. Everybody's saying, I love you. Everyone's, dealing with conflict in a way that is healthy, right? They're talking about how they feel, right? It's safe to cry here. It's like, okay, these pattern recognitions are telling me this is probably something that is safe for me. Now, nuance matters, so some of it matters on the specific situations, and if you want to ask about that, that's fine. But in general, how can I tell the difference between familiar and safety? I can't. It's discernment, so it's going to take pattern recognition and time. So I've got to see, is this overall influencing me to feel healthier? So, I mean, using the metaphor of food, right? It's like, how can you tell the difference between something that is tasty and something that is nutritious? It's probably like, well, days later, I feel worse after eating a lot of things that are tasty but not nutritious. And if it's tasty and nutritious, then days later, I feel better and healthy. And does that make sense? Let me know if that answered your question. I believe we would become acquainted with many sorrows when we suffer the death of the ego. Yeah. And in some ways I go, I wonder if you never really kill the ego, you just resurrect it to a different form. But hopefully a form that is less trying to control and manipulate the circumstances. I don't know. Does that make sense? Not that we are sad as much as we are aware of the sadness the ego would rather hide. Yeah, and that's a great line. We are aware of the sadness the ego would rather hide. And this goes back to what I was saying about like being able to be with people going through the deepest of darkness and having some of the worst experiences. Like, I'm not going to go into specifics here, but I can tell you as a therapist, you'd be shocked at some of the stories that I've dealt with from clients. Like some of the things that clients have walked in I actually had a client that was referred to me because she was fired by, I think, 2 other therapists, and both of them because her story was so dark and twisted, so sad, so hard, so painful, that the therapist said it's too triggering for them to treat this person. And so basically I got referred to that client, and we were in therapy for definitely over a year. She still checks in every once in a while. But this person's life is now vibrant and full and healthy, and they have everything that they want. Now, it's not perfect, but the problems they came in with that were too dark for those other therapists are all done. Like, they've never come up in therapy since. So it's been definitely over a year that I've seen them. But it's been at least 6 months since any of those things have come up again, because we've processed them thoroughly. Like Aragorn heading for the Black Gate of Mordor. Yeah, and it's like, and that's bravery, by the way. I mean, it's like if you think about the concept of it, right? Being willing to face the sadness, being willing to go through the darkness, being willing to walk all the way into Mordor, right? I don't know why I'm saying it with that thick accent, but that is, going back to what somebody else said earlier, often what healthy looks like. It's like, I've got other clients that I know that their life would be so much richer and more full if they'd be willing to process some really dark things that they have just consistently said not yet to me. And so we're going slower, and that's fine too. Therapy is not a forced march, but I am going to do everything I can to try to incentivize people to walk into the depths of Mordor, metaphorically, when it comes, for those of you who don't know, that's a Lord of the Rings reference. But the darkest of pains, because I know that on the other side of it is a rebirth that is so much more alive and full and rich and beautiful. And I don't personally believe that there is any ailment that is psychological that cannot be processed through. I mean, it's one thing if it's a medical, like the person's brain isn't functioning, but for a fully functioning brain, I don't care what DSM diagnosis you have, we can work on tools that will make it so you never have to struggle with those things again. And that doesn't mean that there won't be some of the symptoms showing up at some point in your life again, but you'll have the tools to deal with them, so you won't actually have the diagnosis of the disorder anymore, if that makes sense. What did Sam tell Frodo when he tried to do it alone? I recall, but you said better. It's the man, I don't know. You gave me now too much pressure of if I can say it perfectly, but it's like the Frodo is saying as he's out in the boat and he's like leaving on the boat, and he's like, I'm going alone, and Sam says, of course you are, and I'm coming with you, as he like goes into the boat. I might be right. It's a beautiful scene. I might be missing the order a little bit because Sam doesn't know how to swim, and so he's like trying to swim out to Frodo, but he starts drowning, and then Frodo has to save him, and it's this beautiful scene of friendship, and definitely really a good reminder of what life is really about. There's something so freeing once you are able to get to the other side of the darkness, being able to process your emotions through difficult situation also. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this, like, I don't know much about history, don't know much biology, don't know much about the French I took, don't know much in a science book. Um, it's just this, by the way, it's a song lyrics too. I'm doing a little Bumblebee here. I kind of fall into that. That might be a too old song for most of us here, but what I do know is I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be. All right. But anyway, I know that when you choose to go through the darkness, to go through the struggle, to process the pain, I've never seen it not get to the other side where there's freedom and there's more life and there's healthy. So there's a lot of things that I won't pretend to be expert on, and I make decisions that haven't worked out great. It's like not everything in my life is great, but in terms of understanding how to get the thing between the ears in a healthy way, to understand how to process pain, to understand how to live a rich, meaningful life, no matter the circumstances. That is something that has paid so many dividends in my life. And I've come so far, and I've seen other people. And again, like the only times that I've seen clients get stuck where they couldn't overcome something is when they were not willing to deal with something, right? If they're truly willing to do whatever it takes, they consistently get better. That has been my experience with every single client I've ever worked with. How can therapy support ongoing growth even after we feel better? Yeah, so, oops, that was loud. I don't know if that was as loud for you guys as it was for me. I dropped my water bottle. So great question. And one of my frustrations, my pet peeves actually, is clients will go through a moment of crisis. When they get through that crisis, they stop going to therapy until they get through another crisis. Then they come back to therapy, and the cycle repeats itself, because it's like when you're not in crisis is when it's time to actually work on skills. So to be really intentional and work on that deep refinement of character understanding, and that's not trying to make yourself into the best character of all time. It's more about acceptance and commitment therapy, right? It's about looking at the patterns of where you function well, processing through stuff, future authoring, looking at your shadow and doing shadow work, looking at refining the skills of your mental kung fu, as I like to call it, are all things that are ongoing growth things that that are especially easier when you feel better. So some of this stuff, some of that stuff is not stuff that's easy to do when you're in a crisis, right? You can't really practice kung fu in a crisis. You better know it already. And in the same way, when you're going through some kind of big mental health issue, yes, we'll do some skills work, but we can't do a lot. And so I would start with going, in terms of the mental things that I want to make sure that I'm never going to get stuck on before, in terms of the things that are my biggest goals for my mental health, and the richest, most vibrant life, what are the practices that can help me get there? And I don't know if I answered your question or not, but let me know if it follow up. What should be the first song I cover on the cello? I would say that's clearly a mental health question. So very on point. Um, I would pick The Sound of Silence, and I would do the Disturbed version because it's a really good low frequency song that isn't impossible. I can be super hard to learn. Hello, darkness, my old friend, and the Disturbed version is in the cello vocal range. So I can actually send you a PDF for the music sheet on that if you want. It's going to be music sheet. So I don't know if you know bass clef notes, but it's so funny. Reading music seems so complicated, and it can be. But like once you realize it's like, oh, it's just the alphabet up to G and then again, right? That's how it goes going up. And it's all in order on a staff, right? Line and cross line. It's pretty simple to figure that out, stuff like that. So, yes, learning a new thing like playing an instrument is a beautiful practice for mental health progress. Absolutely. Actually, I was just talking to a wrestling coach about how I wish more of our wrestlers had practiced learning an instrument because maybe more than anything else, you have to use repetition to just go again and again. And actually, this is great. Actually, that's funny how it ends up transitioning great to the question that I got about how can therapy support ongoing growth even after we feel better, is because that's when it's time to put in your reps. That's when it's time to practice something over and over and over till it becomes instinct. So when the storm comes, you can do it, right? And that's everything. So it's like you practice, let's say the cello, right? So you practice the cello and you're going to be I just actually looked at videos, a flute video or something, but it works for the cello, where they called it something like wood barn and woodshedding a song, right? And it's just like at first you're just taking two notes, doom 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 doom, and you're doing them in rhythm, like with the metronome, probably slowed down. Then you add a third note, doom doom doom, right? Or like hello darkness, hello darkness, hello darkness my, hello darkness my, right? And I won't bore you with it, right, the whole thing, but it goes over and over and over until it's so consistent that you are smooth and you can do it in a relaxed state and you don't even have to think about it. And it's super smooth. And then you add, and then you add, and then you add, and then you add, and then you add. And it's like with the wrestling program that I'm working right now, there's a Christian wrestling program that I'm doing with my brother. And we got these kids. It's like hard to get them to go that slow and to do those reps. And the same thing is then true with therapy. It's really hard to get people, like nobody wants to repeat. Nobody wants to go over and over and over and over and over and over. But then when you've got it that ingrained that it becomes muscle memory, when you're in a state of panic, you default into the thing that you've practiced the most. And so if you've practiced the most negative self-talk, inner critic stuff, you're still going to fall back to that, even if you've done the inner work to know that you're not that. You still have the programming and instinct to fall back into the inner critic stuff. So repeatedly practicing stuff in therapy helps you to, and to tell your therapist, by the way, if you want to work on this stuff, especially if it's me, but you can, in therapy, work on that stuff again and again. So then when you need it, instinctually you do it without even realizing it. There's only one thing I do not mind doing repeatedly. It's eat ice cream. Well, you thankfully can handle that. A lot of people, both their belly and their stomach could not, but you've got a gift there for that one that you can do repeatedly. Yeah, and it is tough to put in the reps, but like that's all it's a matter of. Like everything in life is a matter of repetition and practice, and we just have to have the patience and put in the time and invest in the things that really matter in life. And for me, I love learning things. So I mean, practicing music, wrestling, whatever. But compare, I know I'm biased, I'm a therapist, but compare that to the inner practices of learning to master the heart and the mind. That's where I want to put most of my reps into, right? To practice those thoughts in a way that produces life and joy and meaning. What better thing could I spend my time with? Ice cream. That's the better thing. Ice cream will work quicker. Ice cream will bring joy faster. But a richer life that you don't have to eat ice cream every day to feel happy. Probably more going to come from the therapy work. Okay, so that's pretty much it at time. I'll answer any last questions if we have it, but otherwise might get off a little early because I feel like we had a good little chat here. So I appreciate everybody who participated in the chat. We got some great questions, some great comments. Are you related to John Wick? Not yet, but if anybody messes with one of my cats, I'm going to look like I'm related to John Wick. But I think that's a hair. Does he have long hair? Yeah. Keanu Reeves is pretty cool. But thanks, bud. All right. So love you all and hope you have a great night. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for participating in the chat. I really do appreciate it. We'll be here. God loves you and so do I. Thanks, Joe. I'll be here next Sunday at 7:00. All things considered, I think. Yep. Love you too. All right. Bye.